Welcome back to the channel, everybody. An update on the Super M progress since the last video. So I've been into it and I have resealed everything on the front. So I had this little cover off to put a new gasket under it, and I pulled this cover with the input gear assembly off, new gasket under that, new gasket under the seal retainer, and a new oil seal behind the flange here for the input shaft. The input seal I used was the SKF 20702. There are all the specifications for it. You can pause that to have a better look if you so choose. And I also decided to put a speedy sleeve on the wear surface of this flange to help that seal out. This was the replacement one we got, much tighter than the one that was on here, but it was still just a little bit funny where that old leather lipped seal ran. So if you ever need to speedy sleeve a Farmall M or Super M input flange, I used the SKF 99205 speedy sleeve. It fit very well on there. So what you want to look at on any of these H and M series Farmalls, they're both pretty much the same. At least those are the ones that I've been into. I can't say if like a C or anything else would be very similar, but you want to really scrutinize the bearings that are on this short little input shaft. So you can see the constant mesh gear is here. This is the belt pulley drive gear right here. They call this constant mesh because this small gear always drives the larger gear down at the bottom of the counter shaft and subsequently spins the counter shaft whenever this is turning. Just for an example, here is an input shaft from an M. You can see you have the two ball bearings, one there and one there. That's the input flange right here. That is the sealing surface that I put the speedy sleeve on. And we have like a pilot bearing in here, which supports the front end of this. It's the top shaft and it's also the pinion shaft at the same time. And the reason I say you want to scrutinize these bearings is I got a little bit burned by one of these on my Farmall H. I had one of these bearings went out in a bad way, and it actually caused the short little input shaft to cock a little bit sideways and not run true. And I'm not sure how long it ran like that because I bought the thing that way, but it put an uneven wear pattern on the faces of all the gear teeth. And when I went in there and renewed the bearings, I basically replaced all the bearings in the whole back end and put this input shaft back on its proper axis again. The problem was now, because of all of that profound wear, uneven wear on those teeth, instead of being flat across, they were kind of a little bit crooked. So when you renewed everything back to the proper axis, that narrowed up the contact pattern of those gear teeth, and that's why my H howls like a banshee. So what I'm going to have to do on my H is replace for sure this input gear as well as the other constant mesh gear down at the bottom, but that's why I bought that that spare parts rear end, and I might just do the entire transmission, all the gears while I'm in there, because that's kind of a high hour machine, lots of wear. But we really inspected the input on this Super M, and that thing is good, so I don't see any problems at all right there. So we'll just look at the gear functions here real quick. We're in neutral right now, being that we are not spinning any of the top shaft, pinion shaft, any of the bull gears. So this gear back here is going to be reverse and first. So if we slide this ahead, that gives us first gear right there. You can see we are not turning the ring gear very fast. And when it slides back, it engages with the reverse idler gear down there. You can see now we're going in the opposite direction. So that is reverse and first right there. We're back in neutral again. So now we have second, third right here. We will slide that back. That is going to be second. And when this slides forward, that is third. So we'll put that back to neutral. Now this is fourth and fifth, so when this slides back, that gives us fourth. You can see we're spinning that ring gear a little faster all the time. Now in fifth gear, what happens is this gear slides forward, locks onto the input gear, and basically turns it into a one-to-one drive from the input all the way to the pinion shaft. So that is your road gear. and you are cooking with gas when you're in that gear. And that's why on my H, first through fourth, the thing howls really loud, because all the driving force is going through these constant mesh gears at the front that are so worn. But when I put that thing in road gear, it basically bypasses the lower countershaft altogether. Like I said, turns this into a direct drive straight to the pinion, and that thing gets whisper quiet. So that's why my H is so loud, and that's what I'm going to have to get back into my H and fix one day. But M is the same setup, just a little bit bigger, so I figured I'd just kind of show you guys how all that worked and give you an idea of the same type of job I have ahead of me on my Farmall H. So with all that out of the way, I'll tell you I did wash this entire compartment, this entire case I should say, out with clean diesel fuel. Flushed the front, flushed the back. We cleaned all the settle out that was down beneath the bowl gears down there and all the low points. Again, everything is really nice in here. I have cleaned and prepped the entire top deck gasket surface, made sure everything is flat. We took care of a few of the bolts, had a little bit of pulled material, a couple of raised spots there and there where somebody had previously wedged a screwdriver in there to try and move the bell housing away from the front. We flattened all that back out, and I ran a tap through all these threaded holes, not so much to rehab thread damage, but just to kind of clean all those out. So the whole back case is prepped and ready for top cover work to begin.
Squatch Senior here, another update on this M. As you can see here, I have the water pump all tore down, cleaned up, checked over, ready to put back together. I got my new seals. Main reason I tore this apart, basically check out bearings and stuff, but basically to reseal. This thing still had the old leather seals in. They're not looking real good, so I got some new seals for that. Had to make a felt washer for underneath here on the pulley flange. You can see where that runs there. So anyway, got that all cleaned up. Got my manuals out. Basically, I like a parts manual. It does give you the breakdown, tells you the sequence stuff goes back in. IT manual does give you a pretty basic overhaul procedures on this. So anyway, we'll get them bearings packed, put together in here. And another project I've got tore down, cleaned up is the governor. Between these two projects, things are looking in really good shape. So basically what I'm looking at is just getting some new seals in these. So let's get started. To pre-lube the bearings, I just use my cheapy old wheel bearing packer, works good. Just pump grease in till you see grease squeezing out, and you got her pre-packed. Any of the residual grease inside, I'll pack the cavity in there with it, give her a little extra so I can use that up in there. Got the first bearing slipped in, and now I'll take this over to the press and we'll get the new seal pushed in. Okay, got the seal pressed in, bearings in place. Next off goes the spacer. Got the other bearing packed. We'll take the extra grease, we'll kind of put down in the bottom side, and we'll slide this bearing on. Okay, then we got one more spacer to go on top of that. And next up, I have to put a seal in here and make a gasket yet right there. So we'll get that done before we get back at her. Okay, now we got the bearing installed, got my gasket made, seal installed, and before that can go on, we'll have to put this adjustable pulley half on first. So anyway, we'll get that screwed down. Everything nice and free there. This is the adjustable sheave that adjusts your belt tension. So then you do have a set screw with a jam nut. You got 4 places for it to go in. So you just keep turning this in or out until you get the right belt tension. So anyway, we got that on. Next up, this piece can go on with the seal. Then the spacer, which is also the riding surface for the seal, we'll put that on. I like to put it on this way because it'll slide into the seal a lot better. Get that in. And then the nut that tightens it all down. Now that I got the nut tightened up, everything seems to rotate good, no bind, it's all smooth. Next up, we'll do the impeller. That goes in from this side, self-explanatory. Rotates freely. I am going to use the old packing. I had quite a bit of the packing nut left to tighten down. Never did leak, so then if worst comes to worst, we'll just have to redo it, that's all. Get the packing nut in there. Yeah, I'm just going to do hand tight for a lot of this stuff now. A lot of this will be readjusted after we get it on the tractor. And now I do have a new fan going on, but I'm going to leave that off for now. And I'm just going to put these pieces in just so I don't lose them. Another thing, they'll have to come off again to get that fan on. What these are the drive studs for the impeller. I'm just going to barely snug them. And then the next up is this. What this piece does, as the pulley's turning, this piece locks in to the impeller, and then that in turn turns the impeller. So again, we'll just get this stuff in loose, and we'll do the final after we get her on the tractor. And again, this stuff's all coming off, so we'll just put stuff together enough to hold her. We'll just put these in so we don't lose them. Like I say, all this got to come off later. This holds a fan on also, so that's like I say, this will get a paint job and stuff first. I'm gonna not touch the fan. That's got a pretty good paint job on already. So that finishes up the water pump for now.
All right, beginning work on the top cover for that whole back end on the Super M. I have it outside, and I really just have to do a thorough cleaning on this, and there's a lot of heavy rust down here where the battery box was, seat frame, whatever you want to call it. So I'm probably gonna have to do a little bit of blasting back there to really get all of that real thick rust off of there. I don't know that I'm gonna blast the whole thing because most of this can be scratched down sufficiently with a wire wheel. But to make things easier and to avoid damage, I'm gonna take the shift forks and rails off of here. That way I can roll this around and a lot easier and not have to worry about hitting or bending any of those. So I'm gonna remove the guide plates here, and I think I'm gonna leave this piece on. That is like a travel block stop for these shift rails. There's a cutout on the bottom side that hits to either side of that, keeps them from over traveling, so I don't think I need to take that piece off. It's probably not going to be in my way. Besides, it gives me a chance to make some new fold over locks and bend those properly. A couple of those were a little bit to the wrong side, so we're going to keep that eyelid from twitching. Now these forks will be under spring tension because of the springs and detent balls back there. Work everything up evenly, release the tension. Hopefully not have anything go flying that I have to pick out of the dirt. There, we're free. Okay, we got lucky. 2 detent balls rolled, but they didn't go anywhere. springs so far are all looking good. All right, don't have to do anything with those. Okay, so it's a little while later, and I've got it degreased on the bottom side and the top side as well. Here's what I'm looking at though. You can see all these bumps that stick out back here. Usually there's a bored and threaded hole that goes down from the top around each one of those. Oh, heavy. So we have these two that were in use for the old battery box slash seat mount. You can tell by all the extensive rust and pitting that there was a lot of leaking batteries on this over the years, quite corrosive. I have scratched out these two holes here and here, which thankfully don't have broken off bolts in them. It feels like there might be some threads left in those. I'll have to do some cleaning on those to tell, but we have on the back side places where there could be a bolt there and there, and then another one there and there, and then another couple in there and there, that area. So I don't know if I'm gonna find any more threaded holes in here. I don't know what the original battery box anchored to, because the bottom had been rotted out and then replaced with scabbed in metal, and they were using this hole and this hole and then this top cover bolt back here. So as you can see, there is a lot of scaly rust. It's gonna have to be cleaned on this, and I'm probably even gonna sandblast that too, see if I can maybe unearth traces of more bolts, perhaps broken off ones I might have to extract. I don't know. All right, so no matter how hard I look at this area where it was extremely pitted, I only see those 4 bolt holes. I don't see any evidence of any others. And like I said, I'm not exactly sure how many were supposed to be in here. This is the first time into a Super M for me, but I got to looking at the parts manual, and it looks like 2 of these 4 holes up here are for the battery box hold down, and then there are L brackets that go to that deck bolt and that deck bolt. So I'm pretty well confident that there's no other broken bolts in there to have to extract, which makes me happy. So after blasting all the harder to get at areas, I scratched the rest of this down with a wire wheel. Let's hinge this down again. Oh, that's heavy. I even got these sides here with a wire wheel, good enough to just get a working tractor coat of paint back on. If you ask why I don't bother sandblasting the entire thing, it's a conservation of resources type of thing. I just have a small little blaster, and I usually just try and stick to the areas that definitely need sandblasting, and I'll do the rest with a wire wheel. So got all the gasket surfaces cleaned as well. As you can see, there's still some residual oil running out of some of the holes in here, and even after the initial degreasing and then the subsequent blasting, I don't know if you can pick it up in the camera, but you can see some grit, some fine grit glistening in the sun. That stuff just gets all over everything. So I'm gonna probably do like a Purple Power solvent clean on this, blast it with the pressure washer for the final prep, and we'll move on. As you can see, there's a little bit of flash rust that has to be dealt with, which is unavoidable anytime you have absolute bare metal and you put water on it. But it's a hassle that I'm willing to put up with, because I hate the fact that there's any kind of sandblasting grit that would still be on this that would get washed away by oil and then through the entire gear case of the tractor. Putting grit into the back end is the thing that I want the least. So I am willing to cope with the necessary evil of, yeah, you have sandblasted material, you spray water on it, as it dries, it's going to flash a little bit brown. Wire brush and a rag, get right on it, and you can usually get it cleaned back down to the point where you can put a primer on it and it's not going to give you problems. So just my own personal opinion, And if I cannot thoroughly blast with good soap and water a component that I've sandblasted, I won't sandblast it. And I certainly, my personal preference is not to sandblast any assembled machine because grit gets in. Just my personal experience. Anybody else can do what the heck they want. That's just one thing that I won't do, because I've tried to mask openings before. I've tried to keep the sandblasting grit out, and you guys know how picky I can be, fussy with things. I had everything masked and plugged just to the utmost extent, and I still found grit in the machine that I blasted, and I ended up taking it back down and cleaning it all back out anyway. So, like I said, again, not me preaching, and this is not me saying that you have to do everything the way I do. You can do things any way you want. It doesn't matter to me, but this channel is just about my preferences and what I do. So we'll finish with the cleaning the flash rust that popped up here, and I'll try and get some primer at least on this sandblasted area yet tonight. Okay everybody, it's the following day. I got my primer on the heavily pitted sandblasted area last night before I closed up shop out here. This morning now, I've cleaned the gasket surface, made sure everything is flat, and I've made a new top cover gasket. And I had to make this one in 4 pieces because the gasket sheet material I had was not big enough, of course, to do it all in one. We could have seen if we could buy a new one, which I'm pretty sure you probably could yet, but where's the sport in that? Come on guys. So like I said, 4 pieces. The first one, you can see the joint right there, goes around in a U shape to right here, and then the second piece extends up the side to my next interlocking joint right there. Third piece is in a U shape around the front to this interlocking joint there, and then the fourth piece brings us back to where we started. So that should be pretty good for that. Alright, time for shift forks now. Got grease on all of the critical areas. Detent springs and balls are in place. Light coating of grease, hopefully to help stick those a little bit. This works great every time the record button is not pressed on the camera. So it's kind of tricky to get these shift rails started in without knocking any of those detent balls around. So I'll just start the bolts at the front, and I should mention made new fold over locks for the 4 bolts, because you have to put new fold over locks on every time. Not optional, right? So we'll keep these forks lined up back here for the neutral pockets. Just start setting these down. Run these back here a little bit. Right there. You can move these a little bit to help neutralize those detents and give them each a home to go to. Start drawing these down with the bolts little by little. Nothing has flown out yet. We're doing pretty good. Okay. That's all hand tight. Everything looks like it's locked in fine. Alright, so after tightening everything down, boom, perfect 90s on that fold over lock. Boom, perfect 90s on that one. We come down here, perfect 90 again right there. But then there's this one that tightened in at about a 47 degree, which is not improper fold over lock etiquette by any means. That is still a right, correct, and proper fold, but it's just not as pretty as the nice 90 degree ones. So, and again, I never messed with these. You can see we'll just not even get ourselves started on those, but they're holding, they're going to be fine. So yeah, I like nice clean 90 degree bends, but shift forks and rails are in, detents are all right and proper. I suppose we should put this thing on the back end so I don't have to look at it anymore. Alright, gasket pieces are all in place, and I've assisted each interlocking joint with a little bit of extra sealer to prevent any possible leak paths from going through. Just a slight bead of the ultra black around on each side. Cover's ready to go on. Pardon the camera here. It's suspended right above the case. So let's get it put down into place. As you can see, to assist in the alignment, I have 2 long cut-off bolts to act as alignment pins. They will also make it a little bit easier to line 3 shift forks with their respective gears. Okay, we're getting pretty close. With the assistance of a long screwdriver, line each gear with the fork. Get there. Pretty close. All right, I think we're home. Alright, so to finish up the video, I tightened all the bolts down. I have 4 temporaries here where the belt pulley would go, just to apply some tension to that cover to allow that gasket to take a set. One thing I want to note, I also applied sealant to the threads and the shanks of all of these bolts. 2 reasons. These are not blind holes. Well, most of them are not blind holes. They are open down into the gear compartment, and you can risk oil wicking its way up. The main reason is because of the way they've recessed these bolts so that the operator's feet do not snag on them. They put them down into a hole. Well, those holes also collect water, and the water can seep down between the shank of the bolt, through the through hole in the cover, go past the threads, and it can wick its way down into the back end. So I like having all of those well sealed. I even sealed these while I was at it. So alright, top cover's on. I think we're gonna call it a day right here. Plenty of other, boy, we're getting a lot of glare in here from the window, sorry about that. Plenty of other things to do. We have the PTO to rehab still. We have brakes to rehab. I want to get this broken off bolt out of here. Now that I have this most of the way covered in, I can start cleaning this rust out here to get these axle seal retainers off. Start resealing that. I've got that cross shaft that all the pedals go on with that loose clutch pedal. We can tighten that up. Where to begin? All I'll say, guys, is thanks for watching. I'm moving on to the next challenge.